In the heart of the city, where towering skyscrapers cast long shadows over narrow streets, there stood an old tailor's shop that had survived the relentless march of time. Its windows were dim and dust-covered, and the sign above the door, once vibrant, had faded to an illegible relic. Inside, the shop was a labyrinth of suits and fabrics, the air thick with the scent of mothballs and the weight of forgotten years. Arthur Dunbar was a man of precision and pride, a suit salesman with an impeccable reputation. He had worked in the trade for decades, catering to the city's elite with garments that fit like a second skin. But the years had been unkind, and business had slowed. Desperation led him to the shop that afternoon, lured by rumors of an extraordinary tailor known only by a whispered name, Azale. The bell above the door chimed softly as Arthur stepped inside. The interior was dimly lit, the shadows clinging to the corners like a forgotten nightmare. The walls were lined with suits of every imaginable fabric, each one more exquisite than the last, yet there was something unsettling about them, an almost imperceptible wrongness in the way the cloth caught the light, as though it resisted the touch of the sun. "Good afternoon," Arthur called, his voice echoing in the stillness. There was no response, only the faint rustle of fabric as he moved deeper into the shop. His eyes were drawn to a suit displayed on a mannequin at the center of the room. It was unlike anything he had ever seen, a deep, shifting black that seemed to absorb the light around it, its surface almost liquid in its perfection. "You admire my work," a voice said, low and resonant, as though it emanated from the walls themselves. Arthur turned, startled. The man who had spoken stood in the shadows, his features obscured, only his eyes visible, two pinpricks of darkness that seemed to pierce Arthur's very soul. He was tall, impossibly so, with long, spindly fingers that were more like talons than human hands. "Yes," Arthur stammered, unable to tear his gaze away from the man's eyes. "It's remarkable." The man, Azale, stepped forward, his movements smooth and unnervingly fluid, like ink spreading across a page. He reached out and touched the suit, his fingers gliding over the fabric with a familiarity that spoke of centuries of craftsmanship. "This suit is not for the faint of heart," Azale murmured, his voice barely more than a whisper. "It is made from the threads of reality itself, woven in the darkness between worlds. It will fit you perfectly, but the cost is something you must consider carefully." Arthur's heart pounded in his chest, but he was entranced. He had never seen such a garment, never felt such an overwhelming need to possess something. The suit seemed to call to him, its dark folds promising power, prestige, and something more, something he could not name but which stirred a primal fear deep within him. "I'll take it," Arthur said, the words spilling from his lips before he could stop them. Azale smiled, a thin, cold curve of the lips that did not reach his eyes. "Very well," he said, turning to retrieve a tape measure. "Let us ensure it fits you perfectly." As Azale worked, measuring and adjusting with a precision that bordered on the supernatural, Arthur felt a growing unease. The room seemed to close in around him, the shadows deepening, the air growing thick and heavy. The suit clung to his body, its fabric cold against his skin, as though it had a life of its own. When Azale finally stepped back, his eyes gleamed with a dark satisfaction. "There," he said softly. "It is done." Arthur looked at himself in the mirror, his breath catching in his throat. The suit was flawless, fitting him with an unnatural precision. But as he stared, he realized with mounting horror that the reflection in the mirror was not his own. The face that stared back at him was twisted, monstrous, his features elongated and warped, his eyes dark voids that seemed to consume the light. What is this?" Arthur gasped, stumbling back. Azale's smile widened, revealing teeth that were too sharp, too many. "You wanted perfection, Arthur Dunbar. But perfection comes at a price." Arthur tried to tear the suit from his body, but it clung to him like a second skin, the fabric merging with his flesh, binding him in place. The room around him began to shift, the walls melting into darkness, the floor crumbling beneath his feet. "Do not fear," Azale's voice echoed, now impossibly deep, reverberating through the very fabric of reality. "You are merely becoming what you were always meant to be, a vessel, a conduit for the elder forces that shape our world." Arthur's scream was swallowed by the darkness as the suit tightened around him, his body contorting, his mind unraveling. The last thing he saw before his vision dissolved into blackness was Azael's eyes, glowing with an ancient, malevolent light. The tailor's shop stood silent once more, the bell above the door chiming softly as it swung closed. Inside, the suits hung in perfect stillness, waiting for the next soul to walk through the door, unaware of the unspeakable horror that awaited them. And in the darkness between worlds, where reality frays and the elder gods stir, a new servant was born, bound forever to the will of an unfathomable power.